A man once created fake money so perfect that even trained experts couldn't tell whether it was real or counterfeit. And what made it even more terrifying was the fact that no one, not even the authorities, knew who was truly behind it, making this one of the most shocking and psychologically intense stories of deception ever told. Hello everyone, welcome back to Drama Uncovered, and thank you for being here, because today's story is not just about counterfeit money, but about obsession, precision, identity, and how one man used his extraordinary ability to blur the line between reality and illusion in a way that shocked the entire world. The story begins inside a prison, where we meet a man named Lee, who is trying to send a letter outside. But since he doesn't have money to buy a stamp, he carefully begins drawing one himself, not rushing, not guessing, but observing every tiny detail with intense focus, almost as if he has trained his eyes to see patterns and imperfections that others completely miss. And as he recreates each line and curve with absolute precision, the stamp begins to look indistinguishable from a real one. And when it finally passes through the system without raising any suspicion, even fooling the prison staff, we immediately understand that Lee's skill is not just artistic. It is dangerously accurate. Lee is known to be an exceptionally talented artist, yet he has been arrested for producing counterfeit currency and supplying it in the market. And while the police strongly believe that he is part of a highly organized and dangerous operation, Lee continues to deny being the mastermind, repeatedly claiming that there is someone else behind everything, someone he refers to only as the artist. But every time he is asked to reveal this person's identity, he hesitates, not because he is unsure, but because he seems genuinely afraid, as if revealing the truth would expose something far more dangerous than the crime itself. Soon after, a famous painter named Yuan arrives and tries everything within her power to get Lee released, using her influence, speaking to officers, securing approvals from higher authorities, and pushing through every possible legal route. But despite all her efforts, nothing changes, because Lee refuses to reveal the identity of the artist, and this is where Yuan realizes that the truth cannot be forced, it must be understood. So she asks Lee to tell her everything from the beginning. Lee then takes us back to the past, to a time when he and Yuan were living together in Canada, struggling to survive through their art, where Yuan created original paintings filled with creativity, emotion, and meaning, and her work was admired and appreciated by many, while Lee survived by copying famous artworks with such accuracy that they looked exactly like the originals. Yet despite his incredible ability, his work was not valued, because people saw it as imitation rather than creation, not realizing that his ability to replicate things perfectly was something far more rare and dangerous. This difference between them is important. Yuan represents originality and emotional expression, while Lee represents precision, control, and replication. And this contrast slowly builds the foundation of the story. One day, they get an opportunity to exhibit their paintings in a gallery, and while Yuan receives praise, recognition, and admiration, Lee is ignored completely, and in front of everyone, a man openly mocks him, calling him a fraud and accusing him of stealing from real artists, humiliating him publicly, while Yuan immediately steps in to defend him. But Lee reacts differently. Instead of confronting the man or defending himself, he follows him and apologizes, revealing that what he truly wants is not to prove himself through conflict, but to be recognized for his ability. And this moment changes everything, because the man reveals that his insult was intentional. He already knew about Lee's talent, and he wanted to test him. Impressed by both his skill and his reaction, the man offers him an opportunity to work on something much bigger, introducing himself as Sang, also known as the artist. And from this point, the story begins to move into much darker territory. Lee returns home and burns his own painting, not out of anger, but as a symbolic act, as if he is erasing his past identity and choosing a completely different path, one that will take him into a world where precision is not admired, but weaponized. Sang then reveals his plan to create counterfeit U.S. currency. At first, Lee is shocked and refuses, understanding that this is illegal and extremely dangerous. But Tseng explains that this is not just a crime, but a system, a process that has been perfected over time and has never been caught, presenting it as something controlled, calculated, and almost impossible to trace. And slowly, Lee begins to see it differently, not as something wrong, but as a challenge that perfectly aligns with his unique ability. Eventually, after realizing that he has nothing left tying him to his old life, Lee agrees. Tseng introduces him to a team of specialists, each one responsible for a specific role, including experts in ink composition, printing techniques, and operational security, showing that this is not a random group, but a carefully constructed system where every detail matters. And together, they move to Hong Kong, where they set up a secret facility to begin their work. This is where the real process begins. They start by studying real currency in microscopic detail, analyzing every line, every texture, every reaction, understanding not just how the note looks, but how it behaves, how the ink reacts when exposed to light, how the paper responds under pressure, and how even the smallest inconsistency can reveal the truth. Lee becomes the center of this operation, as his ability to replicate fine details allows them to recreate patterns that others cannot even perceive, and through constant experimentation, failure, and refinement, they begin to move closer to perfection. One of their biggest challenges is the ink, as real currency uses special ink that reacts differently, depending on angle and light, creating subtle shifts in color that are extremely difficult to replicate. And despite repeated attempts, they fail again and again, realizing that this single detail could determine whether their operation succeeds or fails. At the same time, they work on the watermark, developing a layered printing technique that creates the illusion of depth within the note, ensuring that it appears authentic even under close inspection, a process that requires extreme patience, precision, and coordination. But even after solving multiple challenges, the final problem remains: the exact color and material used in real currency. And this is where Tseng crosses a line. He attacks a government transport vehicle carrying official printing materials, an act that results in the deaths of several innocent people, marking a major turning point in the story. For Lee, this changes everything. He realizes that what began as a demonstration of skill has now become something far more dangerous, something rooted in violence and survival. But by this point, he is already too deep. After obtaining the materials, they finally succeed in creating counterfeit currency that is nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. And once it enters circulation, it spreads rapidly across different countries, making Tseng extremely wealthy and powerful. However, their success attracts attention. Authorities begin investigating, noticing patterns in the counterfeit notes, and suspecting a highly organized operation, leading them to send undercover agents to track the source and gather information. At the same time, Tseng establishes strict rules within the team, including one rule that cannot be broken. No one is allowed to use the counterfeit money for personal use, because even a single mistake could expose everything. And when one member breaks this rule, Tseng kills him without hesitation, proving that in this operation, perfection is enforced through fear. The tension continues to build as Tseng prepares for a major deal with a powerful client. But this meeting is not just about business. It is driven by personal revenge connected to his past, leading to a violent confrontation filled with chaos, gunfire, and destruction. During this incident, Lee rescues a woman named Sao, who suffers severe injuries and later undergoes plastic surgery to take on a new identity, reinforcing the idea that identity in this story is something that can be created, changed, or erased. As time passes, trust between Lee and Tseng begins to collapse, suspicion grows, and eventually everything leads to a final confrontation where Lee shoots Tseng, seemingly ending everything. But the story does not end there. Back in the present, Lee finishes telling his story, and the police believe they finally understand who the mysterious artist is. But then comes the biggest twist. There was never any separate artist. No hidden mastermind. Because the real mastermind was Lee himself. Everything, The plan, the operation, the identities, and even the story he told was created by him, forming a perfect illusion that deceived everyone around him. Lee was never a victim. He was controlling everything from the very beginning. And that is what makes this story truly terrifying. Not the counterfeit money, but the mind capable of creating such a flawless deception. In the final moments, Lee attempts to escape with Sao, but as the police close in, Sao realizes that Lee never truly saw her for who she was. And in that moment, she makes a final decision, detonating a bomb that ends both their lives instantly. In the aftermath, we see Yuan living a peaceful life, far removed from everything that happened, and when she is shown Lee's photo, she recognizes him only as someone from her past. And in the end, what makes this story truly powerful is the realization that Lee didn't just fake money. He created an entire identity and made the world believe in something that never truly existed. Thank you for listening to this story on Drama Uncovered. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next story.